Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere warm, ancient, and slightly sandy Babylon. You're standing barefoot in the cool grit of the Mesopotamian desert. A thin linen robe catching the midnight breeze as thousands of stars blink lazily above your head. There's no light pollution here, just the smell of clay ovens, distant livestock, and that odd silence cities used to have before car horns and tick-tock above you. The moon glows fat and orange, halfway through its arc. Below, scribes scratch on clay tablets by torchlight. You're about to learn how these people who hadn't even invented soap, yet somehow gave us one of humanity's most baffling inventions. The time zone. You probably won't survive this place, by the way. You don't speak Akkadian. Your sandals are subpar, and honestly, there's no coffee. But don't worry, you won't be here long enough to get executed for disrespecting a sun deity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly toward the edge of the city. Babylon isn't quite what Hollywood promised. No flying carpets, no sassy blue genies. Instead, you see wide brick walls, low mud brick homes, and people quietly moving through moonlit alleys, wrapped in layers against the desert chill. It's night, but no one here talks about time the way you do. No 9 to 5, no 3 p.m. Zoom meeting. Time, to these people, flows like the Euphrates. Broad, bending, always present but rarely precise. If someone asks you when the market opens, the answer might be, after the second rooster cry, or when the eastern shadow of the temple touches the bathhouse wall. Not exactly what your digital watch would like to hear, and yet, they're watching the sky very closely. Because for the Babylonians, time isn't about punctuality. It's about power. It's about knowing when to plant crops, when to read omens, and, perhaps most importantly, when to hold a festival so the gods don't get cranky. You look up. Again, the sky is their calendar. The movement of stars, the sliver of moon, the moment Venus dips behind the horizon, all of this matters. You follow a sleepy priest, climbing to the top of a ziggurat, Babylon's version of a skyscraper/stargazing tower. He's wrapped in layers of linen, mumbling something you don't understand, but you do understand this. He's timing something. Not with a sundial or a clock, but with his eyes. He squints at the horizon, waits, then makes a tiny mark on a piece of clay. You realize something odd. He's not just watching the sky for fun. He's aligning sacred rituals with celestial movements. Time, for them, is divine choreography. Historians still argue whether these priests were scientists or just very organized mystics. But here's what's certain. They documented the heavens meticulously. Their cuneiform records, dozens of them, describe not just stars and planets, but the timing of everything from eclipses to eclipses that never happened, because a goat sneezed, and then there's you. Trying to remember if you put your phone on silent dot. As you descend the ziggurat, the air warms slightly. It's still the middle of the night, but things are happening. A baker yawns as he starts his morning fire. A scribe opens a shutter. Even the city begins to hum quietly, because time here doesn't sleep, it just drifts. You pass a courtyard where two men are arguing, not yelling, just grumbling in that slow-motion Mesopotamian way, about whether a particular ritual should have started at moonrise, or when the moon crossed a certain constellation. You don't get all the words, but one phrase sticks. Ilushmik. It means the god of the sky. They're timing their lives to keep him happy. You wonder how that works with cloudy weather. But cloudy weather isn't the problem. The real issue is, different cities have different skies. Remember, this is a sprawling region. No email, no radio, no TikTok duets about what time sunrise should be. Each city has its own system, based on local observations. So the sun rises in Babylon at one moment, and in your 100 miles south, several minutes later. Doesn't sound like much, unless you're trying to send a royal message, or hold a kingdom-wide ritual. Suddenly you're late, or too early. You pause at the edge of a garden, listening to a date palm creak in the wind. A young boy is tossing pebbles into a water basin, trying to mark time. He counts them as they splash. His rhythm is off, but it doesn't matter. He's learning that time is measured not just by water, but by waiting, and you're starting to realize that this sleepy, chaotic system will one day evolve slowly, awkwardly into the same structure that forces you to attend Zoom calls at 8 a.m. sharp. You can almost hear the ticking of distant centuries, counting down, but don't worry, we're not rushing. We've got all night. By now, the soft city noises have shifted. Camels grunting, sandals on stone, a distant splash. You're standing near a small clay tablet workshop, just as a young apprentice yawns and rolls up the mat he slept on. A fire crackles weakly in the corner. Before the day gets too hot, it's time to copy down the stars. Welcome to the home of cuneiform, the world's first written language, and arguably, the planet's first bad handwriting. Thin reeds are pressed into wet clay to form tiny wedge-shaped marks, and it's through this sleepy, pokey method that Babylonian time is preserved. You step inside and sit near a stack of drawing tablets. They aren't diaries. They're serious documents, lists of star risings, lunar positions, shadow lengths. One tablet marks the spring equinox with the phrase, "When daylight and darkness hold hands equally," which is oddly poetic for a people who also invented terrifying punishments for bad builders. The scribe taps his stylus against the clay like a student stalling for time. He's copying older star charts. These aren't just pretty records, they're predictions. The Babylonians were already building mathematical models to forecast celestial events. You rub your eyes, and it feels a little unfair. They didn't even have pencils, and yet they could track the moon's phases better than most of us track our bills. Historians still debate. How much of this knowledge was science, and how much was religious theater? Did they really believe Jupiter controlled grain prices? Or was that just a clever way to make farmers listen to priests? Either way, the priests got what they wanted: attention. You lean over a freshly written tablet and squint. It's marked with numbers based on 60th sexagesimal system. Why 60? Because it's divisible by so many numbers. And because 10 is just too relatable, apparently. Thanks to this system, you now suffer through 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour. Blame the Babylonians, not your boss. You step outside, blinking into the pale golden light of dawn. Over the city, temple banners flutter slowly in the breeze. The baker from before is now kneading dough. Another man is carefully pouring water into a bowl with holes, what we might call an early water clock. The water drips at a consistent rate, more or less. Unless it evaporates too fast, or gets clogged with desert bugs. Still, for its time, this was groundbreaking. A container you could watch as it counted time, drop by drop. You imagine explaining this to someone on the subway and watching their AirPods slowly fall out in disbelief. The idea of measuring time outside of the sun's movements was radical. For most of human history, your schedule was sun's up, do stuff. Sun's down, stop doing stuff. But the Babylonians were creating systems that worked even at night. You picture yourself standing by one of these vessels, watching each drip stretch into the next, the world slowing around it. And those slow drips, they're going into a written log, where priests later compare them to sky changes. This is time, not just observed, but written, recorded, tracked. The quiet birth of bureaucracy, inside the temple library, a senior priest, heavy-lidded with sleep or wisdom, or both reads aloud yesterday's timings. There's no clock on the wall, just a sunbeam creeping along a carved line, and the scent of warmed ink. You drift past another clay record labeled with the phases of the moon. Each crescent sketch pressed carefully into place. There's something comforting about it, these ancient people taking such tender care to notice when the sky changes. And then, in a dark corner, a child scribbles in clay-knot words, just patterns. His mother watches nearby, probably hoping he'll be promoted to assistant scribe and not goat shed cleaner. You smile, and the child squints at you like he knows something about star charts you never will. Remember how we talked about power? Here it is again. Only temple officials could read and write. Only they could interpret the sky. If the king wanted to know when to go to war, when the gods might be most pleased with the sacrifice, he had to ask the scribes, and they had answers. often conflicting ones. Historians still argue whether the star data was manipulated to suit political goals, or genuinely recorded with nerdy honesty. Likely a little of both. The sun rises higher now, turning the Euphrates into a strip of glitter. You walk beside it slowly, and a merchant you pass grumbles about yesterday's wrong sunrise. You'd ask what he means, but your Akkadian is limited to bread, and is that a snake? But here's the thing, time in Babylon wasn't static. They didn't just invent systems, they debated them. Scholars from different cities disagreed about when a month began, or when a ritual should start. And because clay tablets don't update themselves, these debates could stretch across years. A goat bleats somewhere, and you find yourself thinking about your own calendar, how Google updates it automatically, how your phone buzzes reminders, and yet somehow you're still always late. Maybe the Babylonians were onto something with their soft, flexible shadow clocks and patient temple debates. You pause on a stone bench as the city wakes around you. Two men haggle over the timing of a debt payment. A woman curses the moon for rising too early. A small boy laughs and yells, "The sun touched the courtyard wall. Time for figs." You close your eyes and realize something very important. In a world without clocks, everyone was still obsessed with timing, just not in the way we are now. No countdowns, no ticking, just a slow, gentle rhythm, shaped by sky and earth, and sleepy clay scribbles. The sun is now fully awake, and so is the city. You wander toward the temple district again, where high mud brick walls shimmer slightly in the rising heat. The streets aren't bustling, exactly more like shuffling. Babylon doesn't do rush hour, it does eventual hour. At the base of a tall temple, a staircase winds upward in lazy zigzags. You begin your climb behind a priest whose sandals flap quietly with each step. Up you go, higher and higher, until you reach the flat roof of the ziggurat. From here, Babylon unfolds in every direction. The river curls through it like a sleepy silver ribbon. Dusty palm groves sway. And above you, a dome of pale blue sky curves overhead, empty of planes, pollution, or even birds at this hour. It's peaceful, almost suspiciously so. The priest sets down a large wooden frame. Inside it are fine threads arranged in a cross pattern. You blink at it. Is this a telescope? Not exactly. It's a star viewer, and while it won't let you zoom into Saturn's rings, it will help you track where certain stars rise and fall. Historians still argue whether these tools were for astrology or true astronomical tracking, but either way, the priest is using it with careful reverence. He adjusts the angle, makes a mark on a waxed tablet, and then checks the sun's position against a row of tiny carved bricks along the parapet. Everything about this moment is slow and measured. A breeze flicks your robe. You hear the soft scrape of stylus on wax. This, you realize, is Babylonian timekeeping in action. Silent, observant, sacred. And it wasn't just about telling time, it was about defining sacred windows. Certain hours were seen as more blessed than others. There were times when offerings would be accepted by the gods, and others when they'd likely be ignored. Or worse, taken as insults. And since no one wanted to end up cursed with crop failure or worse, a truly bad hair day these times had to be nailed down with celestial precision. You lean on the warm stone and peer into the distance. The temple bells haven't rung yet. That happens later once enough priests agree that a specific star has done something vaguely important. Consensus-based timekeeping, incredibly slow, but surprisingly democratic. Down below, you see a small group gathered in a dusty courtyard. They're waiting for a signal from the top of the ziggurat. The priest beside you finally nods, then picks up a polished copper mirror. He angles it toward the crowd, catching a beam of sunlight, and flashes it once. A beat passes. Then you hear a soft bell ring in the distance. Not a shrill church bell more, like a cowbell in a velvet pouch. One clang, that's all. But to the people down there, it means everything. A ceremony can begin. A day of fasting can end. A goat can finally stop wondering why everyone keeps bowing at it. This was Babylonian. Time and action rituals, timed by cosmic events, passed down through torchlight and temple signal. As you descend, your feet tapping each step gently, you think about the modern phrase, cosmic timing. In Babylon, it wasn't a metaphor, it was life. Back on ground level, you duck into a shaded hallway. Inside, two apprentice scribes sit cross-legged with a wax tablet and a large lump of clay. They're sketching different symbols each. One represents a specific moment in the night sky. It looks chaotic, but each shape marks a critical celestial event. Moonrise near Aldebaran. Venus's first reappearance after sunset. The summer solstice. Full moon. You ask if the symbols ever change. The older boy shrugs and says something that sounds suspiciously like, only when the gods get bored. You're not sure if that's official temple policy, but it does explain a lot. Nearby, an older scribe with a long beard stares into a shallow basin of water. The reflection of the sky, now empty of stars, still part of his ritual. He's memorizing how the light plays on the surface, how the angle changes as the sun rises. No one ever told him he could stop doing that just because it was morning. And as you peek over his shoulder, you notice something else. A small list of cities carved on a fragment of clay. Beside each name is a symbol for a star and a number. It takes a moment, but then it hits you. These are local star times. Each city, with its slightly different horizon, marks the same celestial event at a slightly different moment. And here on this very tablet is a primitive kind of time zone, not measured in hours or minutes, not aligned with a standardized clock, but marked in stars. Babylon might not have invented global time zones like we know them, but they absolutely pioneered the concept that different places experience the same sky at different times, and that somehow, you should probably plan for that. Historians still disagree on how well these systems worked in practice. Did everyone follow the same star maps? Did the priests fudge the numbers to match their rituals? Did any of them look at their clay tablet and think, ugh, I'm so over Aldebaran? You exit the temple district and find a quiet spot under a fig tree. A clay pot of water drips nearby, the ancient equivalent of a ticking clock. Slow, uneven, but somehow reliable. As you close your eyes for a moment, you realize that here in Babylon, time isn't just something you count. It's something you watch, something you feel. And whether or not they invented time zones the way we think of them, the Babylonians were already living in a world where time bent to place, and the stars knew the schedule better than you ever will. You wake not fully, but just enough to the sound of sandals whispering over packed dust. Somewhere behind your eyelids, there's the slow creak of wooden carts, the bleating of a very opinionated goat, and the far-off ring of a temple bellius. Just one single clang again, like the universe is trying not to wake the baby. You stretch slightly beneath the shade of your fig tree, and let your mind wander to a concept that would seem simple today, but in ancient Babylon, not so much. Naming days TOC. Here's the thing: you probably take your Monday to Sunday life for granted. The weekly calendar just ... is. But in Babylon, the week as you know it didn't exist yet. Instead, they measured time in lunation of the moon. Each month had about 29 or 30 days, depending on what the moon felt like that month. You couldn't rely on it entirely, though. Sometimes it hid. Sometimes it appeared early. Sometimes the sky was cloudy and the priests guessed. That's right, your sacred festival Mitov happened a day late because someone blinked at the wrong moment. You wander now through the scribe district, where today's task is updating the calendar. It's a team effort. One priest is checking last night's sky chart, another is carving a fresh lunar glyph into a master tablet, and a third is preparing the festival list. They mumble among themselves, occasionally shrugging in that close enough way that ancient timekeepers probably perfected long before modern IT departments. Historians still argue whether these lunar months were ever standardized across the Babylonian Empire, or if each city just winged it with their own best guesses. A few scholars believe there was a secret attempt at a universal calendar, but no one has found a full copy that doesn't look like it's been chewed on by time and camels. But there was some consistency. Every seventh day had spiritual significance. It wasn't quite the Sabbath yet, but it was getting there, kind of proto-rest day marked for purification rituals, special offerings, and, most importantly, not doing normal stuff, which honestly sounds ideal. You arrive in a plaza just as a market stall opens. The merchant lights a small oil lamp not because it's dark, but because it marks a ceremonial opening time. Today, he explains, is the 14th day of the lunar cycle, when trade in dried fish is supposed to bring good fortune. You nod politely while backing away from the fish. This kind of temporal superstition was common. Certain days were good for travel, others for planting, some strictly reserved for offerings to Marduk, the city's head honcho god. You didn't just check the sky, you checked the calendar omens. One tablet reads, "On the 17th day, do not eat onions. It is the day of the cold moon." A tragedy for onion lovers, but an absolute win for anyone hoping to avoid strong breath during romantic moonlight rituals. Still, this naming system wasn't like your weekday planner. There were no Tuesdays or Fridays. Just numbered days, anchored to the moon's moods, and layered with divine meaning. And yet, just like today, people complained about the calendar. A potter nearby grumbles that the priests are adding an intercalary month, again basically a leap month, stuffed awkwardly into the year, like a surprise Monday. "It ruins my kill schedule," he mutters. You smile. The intercalary month was Babylon's clunky solution to a tricky problem. The lunar calendar doesn't fit neatly into the solar year. Every now and then, you'd drift a bit off course, and rituals would start to happen out of season. So the priests would just jam an extra month in, and hope nobody noticed. Imagine waking up and being told, "Actually, there's an entire new month starting tomorrow." Surprise, that's Babylonian timekeeping in a nutshell. Sky-driven, occasionally improvised, and thoroughly ceremonial. As you sip some faintly sour pomegranate juice from a stone cup, don't worry. It's supposed to taste like that. A group of temple dancers rehearses in the courtyard. Their festival's timing depends on Venus appearing at duska. Big deal, since Venus was considered a divine body linked to the goddess Ishtar. If she was late, so was the performance. One dancer sighs. Last year, she rose 3 days early, and ruined the rhythm. You nod sympathetically. Even if you're not totally sure who's at fault, Venus or the choreographer. But this is how daily life worked. Whether it was a public ritual, a trade deal, or the right moment to cut your beard, spoiler, not on the 21st. Everything depended on the moon, the stars, and the scribes who watched them. And you didn't dare question it. If the temple calendar said today was a sacred rest day, then your cart of onions could wait. If a priest said tomorrow would bring bad winds, then you stayed home even if the sky looked like a dream. In this culture, time wasn't mechanical. It was mystical. A gift from the gods, doled out in careful measures, interpreted by specialists, and obeyed by everyone else. 7. When it was wildly inconvenient, as you leave the plaza, the soft sun now overhead, you pass a young scribe who is carving a new month's chart. He hums to himself, stops, erases a symbol, and sighs. You lean closer and notice the month name has changed 3 times already. Is it because of a calculation error? A new omen? Or just a stubborn cloud that refused to move? Historians still puzzle over how accurate these calendars were. Some think Babylonian astronomy was more symbolic than scientific. Others argue they were centuries ahead of their time. You're just glad someone else is keeping track of the moon while you nap. The path curves gently along the outer wall. A dog snoozes in the shade of a fig cart. The air smells of baked clay and dust and sun-warmed fruit. You feel, for the first time in hours, like you could fall asleep on a rock and be completely at peace. Because in Babylon, time isn't just told. It's felt, followed, fussed over and, ultimately, like the moon itself, always shifting. You're back on your feet, sort of. Shuffling along a cracked brick path, you squint against the white shimmer of the rising sun. Babylon is heating up, and you can feel it in your eyelids. But something off to the side catches your eye. What? Appears to be a low wooden post in the middle of a dusty courtyard, casting a long, thin shadow over a row of carved stones. This, as it turns out, is the gnomon, arguably the granddaddy of all sundials. It's not much to look at, but it holds a quiet power. It tells time by casting shadows. And it doesn't beep, glitch, or need a priest's opinion to function, unless it's cloudy, or night, or someone bumps it. or a goat eats it. Still, for the Babylonians, this was cutting edge. You walk in slow circles around it, watching how the shadow creeps like a board snake. It stretches over numbered marks, scratched into stone. Each one supposedly represents a time of day, although no one seems entirely sure if the marks are accurate. A nearby scribe offers you a shrug and says, "It's mostly for show." But the merchants like it. Historians still argue whether these early sundials were ceremonial, or actually used for practical timekeeping. The math is tricky. These things had to be built with precision, and any wobble in construction would throw off the whole day. But here's the sleepy secret. For most Babylonians, time wasn't meant to be exact. The gnomon didn't need to split the day into neat hours. It just had to give a sense of progression before noon, high sun, afternoon, almost night. You know, the kind of schedule that makes you wonder why we ever invented meetings. You lean against a sun-warmed wall as a trader approaches the gnomon. He glances at the shadow, mumbles something about being early, and sets down his basket of dates anyway. Timing, here, is more like a suggestion than a contract. You feel this deep in your soul. Off to the side, a group of students are working on their own sundial, a clay disc with lines drawn from the center. One is holding a stick at different angles, measuring the shadow length and frowning a lot. Another just yawns and says, "It's shorter than yesterday. That means the sun likes us today." You quietly admire that logic. You're drawn now to a shaded alcove where another version of timekeeping is on display. A vertical sundial mounted beside a doorframe. This one is designed for people who don't want to squint into the sky. Instead, the sunlight hits a sloped edge, casting angled beams onto the bricks beside it. When the line of light hits a certain notch, ritual bath time, you whisper to yourself, "Siri, remind me to build a sundial bathroom," and briefly forget that Babylon doesn't do push notifications. Or plumbing, really. The ritual bath itself is filled with tepid, murky water, but the timing of its use is what matters. Priests believe bathing at the wrong time of day can insult the gods. One clay tablet warns of skin curses if you bathe during the sullen hour, which sounds like something your aunt made up, but apparently held serious weight here. All of this, these shadows, rituals, and semi-superstitions point to a truth. The Babylonians weren't interested in precision. They were interested in rhythm, in signs, in meaningful time. Still, you can't help but notice the sheer amount of shadow math happening. Someone, somewhere, is keeping close track. And that someone is probably very sweaty right now. You wipe your brow as the sun hits full blaze. A boy walks past, balancing a jar of water on his head, and you trail him lazily toward a field just beyond the city's edge. There, you see another gnomon, this one taller, thicker, surrounded by goats. It's likely being used to signal the movement of the sun across agricultural time blocks. Farmers here divide the day into 3 big chunks: early, high, and low. Everything else, goat herding, grain threshing, lunch breaks, is scheduled around those loose shadows. You pause and watch one farmer pour water from a jar, letting it drip into his palm until it fills a small cup. It's not timekeeping in the modern sense. It's just ... measuring a moment. Something to do while waiting for the sun to shift. Nearby, a child has drawn his own sundial in the dirt, using a twig and stones. You bend over and point to one of the rocks. "What time is that?" you ask softly. He shrugs. "Nap o'clock." Honestly. Same. There's a lesson in that answer. Time in Babylon didn't rule your life, just passed quietly in the background, like a river, or the hum of bees, or a very polite neighbor who never knocks. You were expected to notice it, sure, but not necessarily obey it. That didn't stop people from trying, though. In a nearby house, you peek in and see a man squinting at a shadow cast on the floor through a roof hole, his homemade gnomon. He adjusts a wooden stick, nods to himself, then yells out to someone in the back. It's the 5th mark. Get the bread out. You're not sure if the bread is overbaked or blessed, but either way, it smells amazing. Back outside, the shadow is now curling into its short noon form. The entire city seems to slow mark its pause. Footsteps soften, The air hangs thick like hot linen. Even the goats stop arguing. And you realize, for all its flaws, this early sundial system is deeply human. It bends with the day, it accounts for clouds, and it never yells at you when you miss a deadline. You smile. Settle onto a low bench, and watch as the gnomon's shadow slowly inevitably begins to grow again. The noon heat hangs like a damp curtain over Babylon, heavy and inescapable. You're lying on a shaded stone ledge now, watching the gnomon's shadow shift slowly to the west, longer, fatter, more uncertain. You get the sense that even time itself is wilting a little under the sun. As the shadow slides past the fifth notch, a low grumble rises from a nearby alley. Two men, one with a palm-woven hat and the other carrying a basket of figs, are in a heated discussion, well, as heated as Babylonian arguments get, which is to say, slow, sun-drenched, and mostly composed of tired gestures. They're arguing about something deceptively mundane, noon. One insists it already passed when the shadow hit the center line. The other swears it's not noon until the shadow begins growing again, not just shrinking. You sigh. Time, it seems, isn't always a consensus even when it's directly painted on the ground. This isn't a new problem. In fact, you're now learning that in Babylon, noon was not a fixed moment. It shifted slightly each day, depending on the sun's height, the time of year, and, let's be honest, how lazy the priest was feeling. That's right. Noon wasn't always when the sun was directly overhead. In practice, it was when certain agreed-upon conditions were met. The sun's angle matched a known mark. The heat reached its peak, or temple bells finally sounded. And so you begin wandering through neighborhoods where noon means different things. A potter's apprentice dumps his clay water bucket and announces its midday break. Across the street, a merchant laughs, saying, "That was yesterday's noon. Today we wait for the rooster's second call." A third man simply shrugs and says, "I follow my stomach." Historians still argue whether there was a single, official definition of noon in Babylon. Some tablets suggest precise solar measurements, using shadows. Others imply it was more ceremonial a time, marked by festivals, mealtimes, or omens. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere between astronomy and goat-based guesswork. Speaking of goats, you pass a pen where a particularly loud one seems convinced it's already late afternoon. Its bleating draws a nearby child who looks up at the sun, nods solemnly, and says, he's never wrong. The lack of a fixed noon might sound chaotic, but in a strange way, it worked. Babylon wasn't a place that ran on Swiss precision. It flowed, it ebbed, it breathed, and people adapted. Still, this created problems, especially when rituals depended on timing. Offerings made at the wrong moment could be considered invalid or, worse, offensive. A tablet near the temple entrance warns, "Do not pour wine before the third bell, lest Nergal drink in anger." No one wants an angry god, or worse, a thirsty one. You observe as a priest consults a dusty clay tablet with faint lines scratched across it. He's using it to measure the length of a shadow at different times of year. It's a crude seasonal clock, and he uses it to approximate when midday hits its peak during each solstice. He makes a mark, mutters something to himself, and sighs. You suspect he's as unsure as everyone else. To complicate matters, geography played a role. Babylon was a big city, sprawling flat, and baked under the sun. Noon in one district might look slightly different in another, depending on the elevation, the view of the sun, or even nearby buildings casting long shadows. So what did people do? They negotiated, literally. If two merchants disagreed on the hour, they might haggle until they reached a reasonable time. If a priest showed up late to a ceremony, he'd simply claim the temple's noon is later. Who could argue? You walk now through a small residential courtyard where a group of women are preparing bread. One presses a hand to her forehead, squints at the sunlight, and says, "Almost the right time for rising." She's not talking about yeast. She's referring to the shadow cast by a fig tree in the corner when it reaches the clay oven. That's her version of noon. There's something deeply soothing about this. No countdowns, no pings, no Google alerts, just light and instinct and the unhurried rhythms of life. Still, it wasn't all peace and sandals. There were legal implications tied to time. Certain contracts had expiration clauses tied to lunar phases or shadow lengths. You hear a man complaining to a temple clerk. My debt was due at noon, his noon, not mine. The clerk rolls his eyes and begins writing yet another tablet. This confusion led some scribes to try and fix things. A few attempted to standardize noon using gnomons with calibrated notches, or water clocks paired with sun measurements. But the moment clouds rolled in, or a clock dripped too fast, everyone just shrugged and went back to estimating. You pause by a quiet canal and sit on a low wall. The sun is inching downward now. Shadows grow again, and with them, the city shifts into its late rhythm. You see carts begin to roll, priests stretch their arms, and fishmongers pack up their salted catches. And you realize Babylon wasn't obsessed with rigid time. It was obsessed with meaningful time. Time that guided prayer, respected the seasons, aligned with the gods. If noon came early one day and late the next, it was simply the sky's will, and who were you to argue? You close your eyes for a moment, the warm breeze brushing your face, and let yourself drift. In a world without clocks, you could lose yourself in the movement of light, in the hush between bells, in the soft, stretched-out moment that was maybe noon, or maybe not. You wake to the gentle lapping of water against stone. The canal beside you glitters with sunlight now angled low, and golden Babylon's version of afternoon. But no one says 3 o'clock or 2:30. Instead, a passerby just mumbles, "Long shadow time." You dust yourself off and follow the path toward the harbor district. Here, time isn't just sacred, it's practical. Ships must depart when the current favors them. Trade caravans need to leave before the desert heat sinks into their bones. And food, as always, spoils with cruel consistency. So how did they manage this without clocks? With a very Babylonian mix of observation, ritual, and informal consensus. You reach a merchant's stall, where 2 men are staring at a sundial carved directly into a shipping crate. One points at the shadow and says, "If we leave now, we make it to Kish by dark." The other squints, considers, and nods. Historians still debate how widespread these field sundials were. Some scholars think they were common among traders. Others argue they were rare tools reserved for temple or royal use. But whether standardized or improvised, people clearly had methods to approximate the hour well enough for daily life. You trail the caravan prep scene and spot another method of keeping time: shadow sticks. Simple rods planted in the earth beside marked lines, each one assigned to a task. You hear a caravan master shout, when the shadow hits the 3rd line, "Tighten the camels." You're not sure what that means, but the camels look mildly concerned. One man even carries a portable time-telling device, a bowl, with holes carved in a spiral. It's a water clock, or at least a portable version of one. As water seeps from hole to hole, he judges how long it's been since sunrise. It's not wildly accurate, but then again, neither is your phone when it updates while crossing time zones mid-flight. You pause and sip lukewarm barley water from a ceramic cup. The air smells like sesame, sweat, and smoked fish. A bell chimes. From the temple district, not because anything specific happened, but because it's that part of the day. The bell, to Babylonians, is more like a gentle nudge than a fire alarm. It simply reminds the city, time is still moving. You're still alive. Go do the next thing, and there's always a next thing. In the corner of the harbor, a woman is arranging her jars for evening trade. She hums as she works, pausing every few moments to check the shadow of a nearby awning. She's using it to time her roasting. "If the shadow touches my foot," she laughs, "the lentils will burn." You nod like you've heard this all your life. You pass a trio of delivery boys who are arguing about how long it's been since sunrise. One insists it's been 6 water measures. Another says 7. A third just says, "Who cares?" and bites into a boiled egg. They're probably all wrong, but they'll deliver the scrolls anyway, and that's what matters. Now deeper into the dock area, you notice something curious. Along the wall is a series of stone notches, each one capturing how the sun's shadow falls across the pier throughout the year. It's an evolving map of time. a kind of seasonal clock etched into the very infrastructure. You step back and admire it. Each notch marks a memory of festivals, shipments, tides, arguments, and long sunburned afternoons. It's both practical and poetic, and the sky, that ever-reliable ceiling above the city, begins to shift color. Blue turns to bronze, and bronze to a pale dusty rose. Afternoon slips toward dusk. Here in Babylon, you realize the concept of afternoon wasn't tied to numbers. It was tied to light. When the river shimmered gold instead of white. When birds got quieter. When goats stopped being annoying, well, slightly. A man walks past you, carrying a large incense tray. He's headed to a small shrine that faces west. You follow him at a respectful distance. As he places the tray down and lights it, the setting sun catches the rising smoke in a swirl of warm color. He whispers a prayer. To the west, to the waning. May the day finish as it began. That's the Babylonian version of Have a Nice Night. As you wander back through quieter streets, you hear a mother calling her children in. Shadow has reached the threshold. She yells, and the kids come running, squealing, dragging dolls made of corn husks. You glance at her doorway and see that indeed, the last finger of sunlight has stopped just at her threshold. That's her version of the day's end. Historians still wonder whether Babylon ever tried to formally divide the afternoon into hours the way later civilizations would. There's little evidence of hour-length exactness, but strong evidence of moment-based precision. When shadow meets lintel. When fire loses color. When the doves go silent. You step past a courtyard where a scholar is lecturing a group of scribes. He speaks slowly, evenly. Time, he says, is not a straight road. It is a circle of light and dark. You are not in it. You are with it. The scribes nod like they understand. One yawns. Another adjusts his stylus. You lean against the warm stone and try to remember what day it is, what time it might be, and realize it doesn't matter. Because here, in the final gold hours of a Babylonian afternoon, time isn't measured. It's lived. You barely notice when the sun slips behind the western wall. One moment it's there, glaring, painting everything in gold. The next, it's gone like a guest who slipped out of the feast before dessert. You blink into the soft blue dusk of Babylonian evening where time takes on a different tone, cooler, quieter, full of long shadows and subtle transitions. In this city, evening doesn't arrive with a jingle or a clock chime. It seeps in like perfume or a memory. The streets hum differently. Now, less noise, more whispers. You walk slowly past open courtyards where families sit on rugs, eating lentils and cucumbers, tearing soft bread into quiet halves. No one hurries. No one fumbles for a watch. They know it's evening because the breeze shifts and the doves go still. And here's something you didn't expect. Babylon had multiple kinds of evening. The first twilight was called Mushasho, literally, the rising time. Not because the sun was rising, but because stars were. You glance up. Sure. Enough. One bright dot blinks into view above the rooftops. Then another. That's your sign. Mashushu has begun. You've officially crossed into sacred star-time. In a small garden, a man lights an oil lamp. Not to see, but to mark the start of the stargazing window. Time in Babylon didn't end with sunset, it transformed. Now you were in the domain of astronomers, sorcerers, and temple watchers. Evening wasn't downtime, it was divine time. You turn down a quieter lane, where the walls are marked with faint chalk lines. You notice something, small symbols, barely visible, near windows and doors. A triangle here, a crescent there. These, you're told, are evening hour glyphs, not used by everyone, but favored by scribes and temple workers who needed to time prayers or rituals. Each symbol corresponded to a celestial event. One building even has a tiny star calendar scratched into its mud brick wall. You stare at it, a little dizzy with awe. Each evening, someone checks the position of a star. Sirius or Venus, and tracks how long it stays visible. Over time, this tells them not just how far into the year they are, but what kind of night it will be. A long dark night. A short warm one. A night for dreams, or a night for warnings. Historians still argue whether these markings represented standard night hours or were just poetic notations. Some think they were used to schedule temple offerings. Others believe they guided farmers in planting or marriages in choosing a lucky hour. And some suggest they were ... decorative, because even Babylonians like to doodle as you pass into a wider square. You find a few people sitting in the open air, facing the rising stars like a slow, collective meditation. No talking, just looking. Someone hands you a warm ceramic cup filled with fermented date drink. It's sour, sweet, and strangely comforting. You sip, you stare. And above you, the stars slowly multiply. In Babylon, night didn't mean sleep yet. It meant watching, for signs, omens, messages. You wander toward the temple observatory, where a platform overlooks the northern sky. Two astrologers sit cross-legged, tracking Jupiter's ascent. Will it cross the red line tonight? One murmurs. If the wind calms, the other replies, you don't ask what the red line is. You just accept that Babylon has red lines in the sky. That's how this city works. And while this all feels dreamy and mystical, it had real consequences. Nighttime observations guided decisions in government, medicine, warfare, and marriage. A certain constellation appearing above the palace might delay a royal decree. A cloud passing in front of Mars might halt a caravan for a day. Even in the absence of clocks, the stars became timers. One priest you overhear has memorized how long it takes Orion to rise fully above the ziggurat 42 breaths. It used to be 40, he sighs, but I've gotten older. You laugh softly. He smiles without looking at you. Nearby, a clepsydra, or water clock, begins to drip. Not just into a basin, but into a marked bowl, where the rising water line crosses notches that represent celestial intervals. The priest watches, then makes a mark on his wax tablet. The stars are high enough now. It's time for the first nighttime offering. You follow a small group of pilgrims into a moonlit garden, where incense smoke curls upward like lazy ribbons. The priest speaks a quiet invocation, timing his words between each breath of wind. You glance at the stars again, so many, so slow, and realize that for Babylonians, night was measured in stars, in silences, and in sequences of breath. There are no alarms here, no countdowns, no anxiety about how much time you have left. Just space, stillness, sky, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the second evening begins. The cooler one, the darker one, the one for dreams. Some Babylonians called it Zerutha, whispering hour. Children are in bed, merchants are asleep, but the city still breathes. You curl up near a garden wall, wrapped in a light cloth that smells faintly of cedar and ash. A flute plays somewhere, soft and unsure. You don't know what time it is, but you know what moment it is. And that's all Babylon ever asked of you. The wind carries a whisper, now cooler, softer, almost motherly. You shift beneath your light wrap and breathe in deep. The city's noise has dissolved into an ambient hush, broken only by the rhythmic drip of a nearby clepsydra. This, dear sleeper, is Babylonian night proper. The ceremonial dusk, not the stargazing hours, but the deep time. The hours when dreams are thick and shadow is total. No more rituals. No more arguments about shadow lengths. Just silence and the slow turning of the sky. But don't mistake this darkness for inactivity. Babylon never fully slept. In fact, some of the most crucial timekeeping work happened now. You rub your eyes and glance toward the ziggurat, the city's stepped temple rising like a cake left in the oven too long. A dim orange glow at the top tells you the night priests are still awake. Inside that top chamber, high above the streets, sits one of the oldest known human observatories. From there, the priest astronomers track stars with chilling precision, recording their positions on clay tablets using tiny triangle-shaped symbols that look like bird tracks. They use a mix of mathematical cycles and lived observation. One priest stares into the dark, whispering intervals based on Jupiter's position. One finger's rise, two fingers tilt. Wait, ... pause, ... He marks each beat with a tiny dent in wax. You realize something. This isn't time in the modern sense. It's not about numbers. It's about witnessing. About noticing the way Sirius climbs half a thumb higher every night. About knowing that if a particular star disappears behind the ziggurat's third stair, then it's nearly the fifth night hour, a measurement you didn't even know existed. Historians still debate how many night hours Babylonians used. Some argue there were 12, like the Egyptians. Others suggest fewer divisions, based on major celestial events like the appearance of certain stars or the moon reaching its apex. You climb slowly, one quiet step at a time up the ramped walkway of the ziggurat. The bricks underfoot are warm from the sun's memory. At the top, a priest lets you sit in silence beside him. He hands you a polished piece of obsidian, Babylon's version of a sky mirror. Through its reflection, you see a glittering dome of stars dancing behind clouds, and then he points. Look. You follow his finger. A faint smudge rises over the horizon. It's Venus, at last the herald of morning. But here's the twist. Venus is the evening and the morning star, depending on her mood. Tonight, she's arriving early, which means the Babylonian calendar will need adjusting. A clay tablet is already being updated, line by line. You peer over the priest's shoulder and see the cuneiform symbols for star, new, and adjust. Someone sighs. That's a lot of rewriting. You sit back. It's a strange sensation watching people argue over when tomorrow begins, even while today hasn't quite finished. Because in Babylon, the new day starts not at midnight, but when certain celestial signs align. One belief says the day begins at moonset. Another, when Venus first appears. Still another claims it's when the silent wind stops. A poetic way of saying just before the roosters lose their minds. You descend the ziggurat just as the moon begins to dip low behind the western wall. Down below, the city has gone still, but not asleep. A few lamps flicker. A cat yawns in a doorway. You hear a far-off yawn and realize it's your own echo. A man walks past carrying a bundle of scrolls. He's a timekeeper, not official, not ordained, just ... Trusted, his job. To report how long the stars have been out to the temple. His measuring tool. A series of knots in a cord he lets unravel slowly from his hand. When the final knot slips through, it's fifth silence. You wonder how he knows the cord is calibrated. You wonder if anyone cares. You wonder, deeply, why we ever decided to swap all of this for digital clocks that buzz and ruin naps. You pause by a small garden basin. The surface is still and black. You lean over and see stars reflected there, warped by the tiniest ripple. For a brief second, you imagine Babylon as a city, afloat sailing across a mirrored sky, anchored only by its people's deep faithful attention to light and silence. Nearby, a woman hums softly as she presses her hand to a wall marked with tiny pebbles arranged in rows. I count by pebble drops, she tells you, and presses one back into her pouch. It's her personal night clock, and she moves a pebble with every breath of a prayer. When she reaches the end, she'll know the next bell is due at the temple, unless, I forget, she adds, and smiles. You like her. This is Babylon at its softest, its most surrendered. The entire city not asleep, but drifting. Time isn't ticking. It's pulsing, like a slow drumbeat. Only certain people can hear. You sit at the edge of the canal again. The moon kisses the water once more. A frog croaks. Somewhere, a temple drum thuds gently. Not to command, just to mark. Mark what, exactly? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe just the fact that you're here. Still breathing. Still watching. Because that's the truth about Babylonian time. It's not for conquering. Not for productivity. Not for alarms and urgency. It's for witnessing, for feeling, for saying, this is now, and I am in it. The sky over Babylon is darker, now fully given to the stars. You sit motionless for a long while, watching as one constellation slowly climbs above the rooftops. You don't know its name, and it doesn't matter. To the Babylonians, every bright point up there has a name, a story, a duty. Some are messengers. Others are guardians. A few are troublemakers. You stretch and rise, your joints quietly protesting, and begin to wander again. The city is quiet, but not empty. A few shadowy figures pass by, night shift bakers, temple guards, astrologers too restless to sleep. Then you see something unexpected. A boy, walking in a spiral pattern, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. You follow, curious. He turns and whispers, "I'm timing the moon." You blink. Of course he is. He's recreating the arc of the moon's path across the sky with his stick, an ancient form of sky watching that acts as a lunar time map. When he completes the spiral, he'll compare it to the last one he made and decide if the moon is faster or slower than the night before. Faster moon, short month, he says, with absolute confidence. Then he shrugs. Or maybe not. You nod solemnly, as if you're in on the joke. You pass a house where soft chanting floats from the roof. A man sits cross-legged beside a burning censer, reading from a clay tablet. This is a kind of midnight prayer, not required, not even common, but his own tradition. He believes that if he reads the stars' names aloud, at the right interval, they will remember him when they next rise. You love that idea. You hope the stars have a good memory. By now, you're wondering if time wasn't standardized. If there were no clocks, how did Babylon function so well? How did they meet for ceremonies? How did they count the days? The answer is both simple and stunning. They didn't keep time. They kept rhythm. Rhythm shaped by sun, moon, stars, shadows, bells, dreams, winds, and fires. Rhythm that you felt, not counted. Rhythm that told you when to pray, when to sleep, when to bake, when to sing. Babylon had no ticking second hand, but it had the water drop, the torch dying low, the priest's breath slowing between syllables. Still, some people did try to divide the night. Inside one small courtyard, you find what looks like a large ceramic bowl, with narrow spouts on either side. It's filled with water, and tiny reeds float on the surface. One slips through a notch and disappears into a lower basin with a faint plunk. A night clepsydra water clock adapted for darkness. A scribe nearby is noting down the intervals with a charcoal stick on a clay board. One reed every 40 breaths, he murmurs. More or less. Historians still puzzle over how accurate. These devices were some more elegant designed to match celestial movement precisely. Others were more symbolic, useful for ritual pacing rather than engineering. But all of them, at their core, showed a deep desire to align human life with the sky's slow choreography. You sit with the scribe for a while. He offers you a date from a bowl, and you eat in silence. The reed drops again. He marks another line. Night's getting heavier, he says. You nod, feeling it too. As you move away, you notice how the stars have shifted slightly. They don't blink or flash, they drift, like leaves on an invisible tide. And the city below responds. Lanterns dim. Dogs curl into themselves. Even the river seems to hush its rustle in a side alley. A pair of elderly women are placing small bowls of oil beside their doorway. You ask why. For dawn, one says. For remembering, the other adds. They don't elaborate. You don't ask. Some things in Babylon aren't meant to be explained there. Just part of the rhythm. You turn a final corner and spot something you hadn't expected. A mural. Barely visible in the moonlight, painted across a long wall. It shows a series of human figures moving in a circle, each holding a different item. A bird, a scroll, a torch, a reed, a star. Above them, painted stars form a spiraling dome. You realize the mural isn't just art, it's a clock, or at least a conceptual one. A visual story of how time cycles, not ticks. How humans carry meaning through the hours. Instead of slicing them into minutes, you lean back against the wall and let the mural wash over you. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It says, there is no rush. Time is not your master. It's your companion. The boy's spiral. The scribe's reeds. The astrologer's breath. The temple bells. The pebble pouch. The garden shadows. The whispering wind. The drifting star. All of it time, not to control. Just to witness, and in this moment, with the night at its fullest, and the stars at their peak, you understand the beauty of Babylonian timekeeping. It isn't about measurement, it's about meaning. You stir as the first hints of dawn color the sky, an almost imperceptible silver behind the silhouettes of mud brick rooftops. No trumpet announces it. No rooster makes a grand entrance. But you feel it. The Babylonian version of morning has begun, not with noise, but with a soft inhalation as if the whole city is quietly drawing breath before another cycle begins. You pull your wrap tighter and begin to walk. The streets are still hushed, the kind of hush that suggests people are awake, but not ready to admit it. A temple bell sounds, not sharply, but with a kind of sleepy yawn, like even it isn't sure why it rang. This is first light, sometimes called Sabitu Episi, seventh soft. The Babylonians used poetic language to describe parts of the morning. This hour was not 6 o'clock. It was when the stars give up. You glance overhead. A few stars still hang on, faint but stubborn. Give them time. You pass a canal where the surface has changed, color no longer black, but now a dusty silver gray. The water reflects the rising haze. A man with a net is already out, whispering to himself. He's timing his throw with the morning wind, waiting for it to shift direction slightly before casting. Best fish come when the wind smells like olives, he mutters. Sure, why not? By the banks, 2 priests are consulting an alabaster tablet, cross-referencing the first star to disappear, a key Babylonian time marker. The vanishing of stars told priests when to begin their day's rituals. Each disappearing point of light signified a new task: cleansing, reading, offering. Recording. One priest leans over to mark the exact moment when Sirius winks out. Day begins, he says simply. Historians still debate whether this moment constituted the official start of the day, or if it was just a ceremonial cue. Some argue it changed seasonally, others say it depended on the god being honored that month. As usual in Babylon, the answer is yes, and also no. And also maybe ask the stars. You step into a marketplace courtyard just as vendors begin to trickle in. There's no bell to start business. Just the slow build of murmurs, feet on stone, clay crates being shifted. A woman opens her stall, not when the sun rises, but when the roof beam's shadow hits the far wall. It's her personal signal, and no one questions it. Nearby, a baker is already pulling soft rolls from a dome-shaped oven. He wipes his brow and announces, "Third shadow's past. We missed early bread." His assistant groans. Again, you smile. In Babylon, being late wasn't always about minutes, it was about missing the rhythm. The third shadow might be different every day, but it always meant something to someone. A small child walks past with a ceramic jug, peering at the ground. He's following the sun's crawl at that moment when it finally reaches his house's courtyard. When it does, he'll place the jug in the center and shout fire blessing. The adults nod solemnly, pretending not to smile. You reach the temple plaza again, where a young scribe is copying the daily omens from last night's star readings. He works quickly, referencing 2 tablets and a smudged cloth chart covered in lines and circles. If Venus returns before the third breath, he murmurs, then the king's traitor should travel east. He doesn't look up, even when a camel sneezes loudly nearby. Priorities. You sit beneath the eaves of a shop and close your eyes for a moment. Morning in Babylon is not noisy, but it is active. It's not announced, but it is felt through smells, shadows, breezes, the retreat of stars, the rhythm of footsteps. You hear a rhythmic splash from across the street. A man pours water from one jar to another, counting to himself. It's not math, it's memory. He learned from his grandfather that 6 pours equals a prayer hour, and so, by his own reckoning, it's time to kneel. This is the paradox of Babylonian time. There are no shared clocks, but everyone still knows what to do. Not all at once, but in order, in motion, in rhythm. You follow the crowd now, forming near the temple gate. A priest steps out, holding a large polished disc of bronze. He lifts it and reflects the sunlight against the stone steps. That single flash of golden light, that's the public time signal. It means the sun has arrived. The gods are watching. Begin your day. No clocks, no numbers. Just the shimmer of light on stone. You glance around. Everyone has paused, just for a moment. Even the goats. Then the city resumes quietly, purposefully, like a slow song you know by heart. One man stretches, his arms to the sky. A girl traces the sun's path along a wall. A merchant counts temple bells in his head. A worker adjusts his robe as the morning heat begins to gather. And you stand still in the middle of it all, breathing deeply. The air is different, now charged, awake, beginning. You've made it full circle. Time in Babylon, you realize, doesn't start. It returns, again and again. Light into dark, into light again. A spiral, a breath, a rhythm. You smile and begin to walk again. No destination, no schedule, just a journey by light. By now, the sun has cleared the walls, and the city glows with a pale golden brightness. Not harsh, not urgent, just steady, like someone gently tapping on your shoulder to say, "Hey, let's begin again." You find yourself wandering toward the edge of the scribe's quarter, where dusty courtyards echo with stylus clicks and the soft slap of wet clay. This is where time, in all its mess and magic, becomes written. Not because Babylon needed clocks, but because it needed stories. A young boy sits cross-legged before a tablet, painstakingly pressing wedge-shaped symbols into the surface. He looks up as you pass and says, "I'm recording when the first crow flew." You smile. Of course you are. Why wouldn't you? For the Babylonians, time wasn't just something they experienced, it was something they documented, every single day. But they didn't just write down hours. They recorded omens, weather, sounds, animal movements, even gut feelings, and each one had meaning. You enter a shaded room where a master scribe is teaching 3 apprentices. They're translating a record from 2 seasons ago. The moon rose thin. The ox sneezed. The barley fell late. That's the entry. But to them, it's not nonsense. It's a calendar of moments, marked by nature's rhythms. Time, the master says, is what happens between shadows. You feel that in your bones. He shows you a long scroll, unfurled across a low table. It's filled with neat, repeating rows of cuneiform. A daily log of shadow positions and ritual timings, matched with celestial events. You see the marks for noon, high wind, sun's bite, river's turn. No numbers, no charts, just names. Each moment, titled and remembered. Historians believe these tablets were used to plan everything from farming to feast days to funerals. But they also served as emotional timepieces, anchoring people to past cycles, reminding them of what was, and what might be again. One particularly fragile tablet catches your eye. The scribe translates it aloud. At the moment the date tree leaned, the wind from Nergal's gate began. The goat turned once, the sky cracked with color. I was ready. Was it poetry, astronomy, weather log? Probably all 3. Outside, a group of temple workers are arranging small stone markers in a spiral on the ground. They tell you it's a solar wheel away to watch the sun's movement over the year. Each stone marks a moment of seasonal change. Equinox, solstice, harvest wind, flood seasons, first stench. One worker adjusts a stone by a few centimeters. Sun's changed, she mutters. Gotta keep the rhythm true. She doesn't check a chart. She trusts her body, her shadow, her memory. You sit with them a while, watching as the sun touches one of the outer stones and turns it warm. That's the sign. Time to begin the chant of alignment. Soft repetitive call, to remind the gods that the humans are paying attention, just in case. In Babylon, this wasn't strange. Keeping time meant being present, completely and repeatedly. Not glancing at a clock, but watching how bread swells in the heat. Not tracking minutes, but listening for the moment birds stop singing, and wind shifts from one alley to another. Even the way they built their homes honored time. You notice the layout of streets angles to catch certain sun paths. Doorways are positioned to glow at dawn or dusk. Courtyards are shadow mapped. One elder tells you, "We build by light." The rest follows. And still, amidst all this, some tried to quantify things. One tablet in the scribal archive shows early attempts at hour division swell, marks drawn on a circle, aligned with solar movement. But rather than being labeled 1 to 12, they're titled Birth of Light, Finger of Heat, Bread Ready, Faint Bell, Goat Shadow, and Closing Silence. You think, That's how time should sound. Even the temple laws included time clauses based on natural cues. One clay contract reads, if the grain is not delivered by the second sunwind after market bell, payment shall be doubled. Try enforcing that with a stopwatch. You walk now through a passage of colonnades. Slivers of sunlight stretch across your feet like golden ropes. A priest stands at the far end, simply watching. I like this hour, he says, when light becomes soft, but hasn't yet weakened. You nod. You do too. Babylon teaches you a secret, that you don't need to control time to live well within it. You just need to notice it. To name the moments. To listen. You pause at a small garden, where two children are burying a pot, marking the place with a sun-etched stone. You ask why. It's the time jar, one says. We'll dig it up when the fig tree blooms again, and if it doesn't, you ask. They shrugged. Then we'll wait another sun ring. In Babylon, time wasn't pressure. It was promise. A promise that the sun would rise, that the wind would shift, that the stars would return, that if you paid attention, you'd never be lost, and so you keep walking not to arrive, but to stay in rhythm, in step with a city that never really hurries, and never really stops, just breathes, just notices, just remembers. The day has fully ripened now. Shadows shrink. Walls glow warm. The canals shimmer as if someone spilled a jar of honey into the streets. This is Babylonian midday, though no one says 12 o'clock. Instead, it's the sun-stand hour, the time when light stretches no further, when the city holds its breath before gently tipping toward evening. You wander back into the marketplace, now bustling, but never rushed. Vendors don't shout, they hum. Shoppers don't shove, they nod. Even the goats seem to walk more politely nearby. Two women are arguing but softly, with smiles about whose courtyard shadow disappeared first. This matters, apparently, because it determines who serves lunch at their shared meal. You wait, as one pulls out a small reed measuring stick, lays it across a flat stone, and calculates the angle of the absent shadow. Yours vanished first, she concedes, barely. In Babylon, even disagreements are shadow-based. You follow the aroma of fresh dates and spiced lamb, drawn toward a shaded awning, where a family eats together in comfortable silence. One elder lifts her cup and mutters, the fifth heat has passed. Her son nods solemnly, then bites into a fig. Time here is measured in heat waves, stomach grumbles, and the angle of breeze. There's no urgency, just awareness. A kind of seasonal, bodily wisdom passed from elbow to elbow. At a nearby workshop, a potter slaps clay onto a spinning wheel. You notice a small slit in the wall, perfectly aligned to let in a sunbeam. When that beam strikes, a carved mark on the floor. He stops spinning. Time for a break. Wheel sun's past, he says. Time to check the kill. And what's his kill timer? A stone slab outside, warmed until it burns his palm after 5 counts. He presses his hand to it, winces slightly, and smiles. Perfect. You see it everywhere. Heat as a clock, light as a bell, wind as a whisper of time moving forward. Even the birds have their own shifts. A scholar explains that certain birds only chirp during the sunlean hour, the moment right after midday, when the day imperceptibly begins its descent. No stopwatch needed, just ears. In the temple district, a group of acolytes carries out midday offerings. Bread, incense, and water poured slowly into grooved basins. These grooves aren't just decorative, they're flow timers, each designed to fill at a precise rate, allowing prayers to align with ritual minutes without ever naming them. You peek over a priest's shoulder. His tablet records the water's path in terms of bird calls and sun positions. Offering poured between heron's cry and third column's glare. That's their version of a clock, and it works. Historians still wonder how synchronized these methods were. Did different priests all recognize the same moment for sunlean or column glare? Or were these personal clocks, each tied to a particular courtyard or temple niche? Most likely, it was both a culture of overlapping rhythms, loosely agreed upon but deeply trusted. You sit on a carved step and notice your own shadow. Once long and sweeping, now curled tight beneath you. You're inside what the Babylonians called Baal's circle, the no-shadow moment. A sacred instant, said to belong to the god, Marduk. Some believed that during this time, wishes whispered into shaded corners might be carried up with the sun's heat. So of course, you whisper. 1. A scribe sitting nearby taps his stylus and murmurs, "Wish hour ends with the Beatles' dance." You look down and see a fat black beetle trundling across the dust in a perfectly straight line. Apparently, this is common knowledge. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and close your eyes. Somewhere, a hammer taps softly against bronze. A lullaby-like chant floats from a nearby roof. A baby cries. A dog-sized dot. All of it is time. You wander again, this time into a library alcove, tucked between the temple walls. Clay tablets are stacked like pancakes, their surfaces etched with weather records. Eclipse notes, moon charts, something stranger. Lists of smells. One tablet reads, sun hyacinth of rose dust. Goat fur, dry, barley sharp. It's a spec lock used, apparently, to mark baking times, or to signal the readiness of ceremonial dyes. The librarian shrugs. Your nose is smarter than a sundial. You love that. Another priest shows you a ceremonial fana, large, feathered object with painted notches along its spine. You wave it once for each sun breath, he explains. By the time the third notch reaches your shoulder, it's time to offer oil. You try it. It's strangely soothing. Time is movement, not measurement. You notice a little girl marking her arm with chalk one short dash every time the temple bell rings faintly in the distance. She's got 5 lines now. That means I can ask for a fig. She grins. You admire her system. The day rolls on. People nap. Traders count their stock by touching beads. Musicians strum in slow rhythms that match the water's slosh against stone. There's no rush, no late, no hurry. Because Babylon didn't teach time as something to beat. It taught it as something to flow with, to notice, to enjoy. As you return to the canal's edge, you see a man carving a new sundial into a flat stone slab. You ask what he'll do if the sun shifts tomorrow. He shrugs. Then I carve again. Because in this city, the point isn't precision, it's presence. You sit again in your spot by the water. The light has softened, just barely. A breeze stirs the edge of your robe. The beetle is gone. And somewhere, far off, a temple bell rings, not to demand, but to remind. The sun is turning. The shadows are stretching. And you're still here. The light is changing again. You don't see it at first, but you feel it. The shadows have started to lengthen, just a little. The gold in the bricks deepens. The heat lifts slightly, like someone gently peeling a blanket off your shoulders. The sunlean hour has passed, and Babylon is sliding into late day. No announcements, no clocks, just rhythm. You walk slowly through the streets, now less busy. Merchants stack crates. Temple assistants pour water into dusty gardens. A fruit vendor packs figs into cloth bags. Humming a tune that's older than the walls. Above you, light dances on rooftops, skipping between the raised palms and lattice fences. This hour is often called Nepeo Agamsi, the sigh of the sun. The city exhales with it. A boy balances a bowl of lentils on his head and marches past, announcing, "Fifth cooling." Apparently, that's what they call it in his house. The time when food finally stops steaming. And you can eat without burning your tongue. It's a personal timestamp. And somehow more poetic than 5 p.m. You wander toward the school of scribes, where students are seated in a shaded colonnade, reciting the names of star positions and wind directions. Their instructor calls out, "What follows the horn of the bull?" One child mutters, "The 6th wind shadow." The others nod. That makes sense to them. Their learning isn't structured by hours. It's tethered to events. The arrival of a star, the way a shadow creeps across the courtyard floor, the scent of dust when the canal wind turns dry. These are their class bells inside. One room, you see a timeline drawn in red ink on a plaster wall. But it's not a straight line. It's a spiral, circling outward like the rings on a tree. At its center, the spring equinox. Around it, tiny glyphs mark events like first date bloom, oxen rest, wind returns, and sun lowers below finger. Historians debate whether this spiral was purely symbolic or actually used for scheduling. Some say it was a meditative tool, a way to contemplate the year's rhythm. Others think it helped priests plan offerings, and a few argue it was just decoration, albeit very well-timed decoration. You keep walking. At a stone corner, a girl crouches, watching the way light slides along the ground. She's waiting for it to touch a chalk drawing an outline of a fish when it swims. She says, "We go home." Time, in Babylon, is playful. A storyteller in a nearby courtyard gathers children under a fig tree. He lifts a hand and says, "When the fig's shadow points to my toe, I begin." You wait with them. It takes 3 deep breaths. Then he launches into a tale of a lost river, and the man who followed it backwards. You don't need to understand the whole story to appreciate it, because in Babylon, stories themselves are timekeepers. Each one belongs to a part of the day. Quick tales at midday, legends in the evening, riddles just before sleep. You move on. And now the city has entered its most melancholy hour, the golden hush before dusk, the hour of summary, of almost done. Babylonians call it Etuoademt, the light of memory. This is when people clean their spaces, gather their families, whisper blessings into doorways. You pass a man brushing dust off his doorstep with a palm frond. Another arranges 5 pebbles in a line at the threshold. "One for each star I'll greet tonight," he says softly. A woman nearby lights a tiny dish of myrrh, wafting the smoke through her kitchen. It's not incense for worship, it's a clock, marking the start of evening food prep. When the smoke reaches the 4th window beam, the lentils should be done. You sit with her briefly, and she shows you her grandmother's cooking notes, not measurements, but time markers. Boil until the goat sneezes. Stir for 2 sunset bird calls. Wait through 1 argument between boys. You love this. You stop in front of a large public sundial, not because you need the time, but because you like the way its shadow now reaches the 7th groove. A pair of guards lean against it, drowsy and unbothered. 7th groove, one mutters. Market's closing. He's right. The stalls nearby begin to wind down. Traders sweep their spaces. Bread that didn't sell gets bundled into baskets for temple donation. The air smells like cooling brick and distant stew. In a quiet alley, a musician plucks a slow, mournful tune on a harp. She's not performing. She's counting the end of the day in sound. Each note stretches longer than the last. When she stops, she nods and says, "The light changed." That's all the clock she needs. You glance toward the ziggurat, now glowing at its edges with the low amber sun. The highest level casts a shadow over the city's heart. In that shadow, a small group of astronomers prepares their clay tablets. Evening omens await. You feel the temperature drop. Just slightly. The breeze now carries more scent than heat. A long shadow touches your feet. And just like that, the day has let go. Babylon never says goodbye to the sun. It bows. With oil, with music, with the rustle of cloth folding back into storage. You walk a little slower now, letting the rhythm carry you forward. The hour is not numbered, but it is known, and it is sacred. The sun slips lower, brushing the tops of date palms with soft bronze light. Babylon now wears its most enchanting-faced twilight, the moment between golden warmth and indigo quiet. The Babylonians have a name for it, Utru, meaning something close to settling or drawing in. That's exactly what the city feels like, now settling into itself. Shadows stretch long and thin across courtyards. Everything feels slower. Even the air seems to walk instead of rush. You find yourself in the weaver's district, where the final threads of the day's work are being tucked away. No alarm ends their shift, only the moment when the sunlight no longer catches in the threads. One weaver gently brushes her hand along a loom and sighs. "Gone now," she says. "Time for food." A child nearby marks the moment by tossing a pebble into a ceramic bowl. It lands with a satisfying plunk. That was her evening bell, self-declared, and somehow official. You wander back toward the residential quarters, where families sit on rooftops and low terraces. This is when people gather, not to plan, not to calculate, but just to be. To sit beside one another, watching the sky shift colors like a silk cloth pulled slowly through firelight. Someone plays a flute. Another hums along. You notice that no one is checking the time, because everyone already knows it. They've felt it through their skin, their shadows, the patterns of animals, the soft ache in their joints. Babylonian time isn't something you read, it's something that happens to you. And right now what's happening is a collective exhale. In one courtyard, you watch a man light 5 oil lamps, one at a time, in a row. He doesn't rush. Each flame marks a different part of the day's end. Last meal, sky darkens. Voices lower, moon comes, and finally, dreams. The 5th lamp is the biggest. You wonder if it ever burns all the way down before he's asleep. You're invited to sit with them, and you do. A woman offers you roasted chickpeas and dates, and the conversation turns to when the stars will appear tonight. There's no tension, just quiet curiosity, like watching a tide roll in. Someone points upward. The first star, a collective murmur, Nindar, appears. Historians still debate the identity of Nindar. Some say it was a planet Venus or Jupiter, while others believe it referred to a particularly bright seasonal star. But in Babylon, what it was mattered less than when it arrived. Because Nindar was the unofficial start of night. No one says 8 p.m. They say it's after Nindar. Another star follows. Then another. The sky begins to fill itself in, by careful. People pause mid-sentence to acknowledge them. Not worship, exactly. More like recognition. Respect. In the temple courtyard, a group of priests stands in a precise formation, each one facing a different cardinal direction. They're listening to the wind, watching the stars, noting which ones appear first, which blink out of alignment. One scribbles on a tablet. The moon whispers behind Nindar. Tomorrow will pass gently. That's a weather forecast, by the way. Whispering moons equals cool mornings. Nearby, an elder sits with a scroll of lunar omens. She's not reading for fate. She's marking how this evening compares to the last 5. It's her way of staying connected. You ask if she believes the omens are true. She smiles. I believe the sky tells stories. And I like stories. You walk again, tracing a familiar path, and pass a row of homes whose doorways glow with flickering light. Each has a tiny hanging basket of fragrant herbs. When the smell reaches the 3rd step, a boy tells you, "That's when my father." It gets home. So now we're measuring time by scent range. Why not? Babylon lets you do that. It lets every family, every house, every alley have its own version of the hour. Some follow the temple bells. Others follow the sheep's bleat. Some follow the stretch of light across a courtyard. Others just wait for the breeze to shift. And yet somehow, everyone stays in rhythm. Because time here isn't forced, it's tuned. Like a lyre, adjusted gently until it hums. The stars have taken their place now. The sky above the ziggurat is rich with pinpricks of light, each one more than a decoration. It's a calendar, a clock, a companion. One constellation, shaped like a bowl, slowly turns toward the horizon. A passing elder points and mutters. When the bowl tips, night is full. You look again, and you believe her. You sit down on a warm stone bench, watching the stars rise and the city dim. All around you, Babylon is not asleep, but preparing for sleep. Voices soften, fires burn lower, doors creak closed. Dreams stir behind shuttered windows, and you're not watching a clock. You're not waiting for a number to flip. You're just feeling the day end, in your bones, in your breath, in the color of the sky. Time here is not a demand, it's an invitation. And tonight, Babylon is inviting you to rest. The stars now outnumber the people still awake. Babylon's voices have dimmed into background. Texture, a clay bowl clinking against stone, a soft call to a neighbor, a flick of sandals brushing along a garden path. The city isn't asleep yet, but it's on the edge of dreaming. You are too. You follow the narrow walkways between homes, your hand trailing along the mud brick walls. They're still warm from the day's heat, but just barely. A cooling whisper of wind lifts your sleeve, and you know, without being told, that the first watch of the night has begun. The Babylonians divided their nights not into hours, but watches periods marked by star movement, animal calls, and the changing air. This is the evening watch, called Musak Oa Airy Entry of the Sky. It's not just a moment. It's a shift in the world's breathing. You arrive at a rooftop where a small family lies under blankets, facing upward. The father points to a glowing star near the horizon. "That one was my grandfather's favorite," he says. "He said it laughed at him once." His daughter giggles. You're not sure if it's a joke or a memory or both. But it works. No one here is glancing at a clock to decide when to sleep. Instead, they wait for a star to move past the roof's edge, or for the fourth night breeze to drift through the window, or for the lamp oil to run dry on its own. You sit beside them for a while, listening to a grandmother's gentle chant. It's not loud or melodic, just steady, like a soft broom brushing time into neat corners. The song marks the end of the day, not because it says so, but because it feels like it. Somewhere below, you hear a dog bark once, then fall silent. That bark, in some homes, is the cue for final prayers. In others, it's the signal to check that the door's lock is secure, or to tuck a charm under a pillow. The dog doesn't know it, but it's the neighborhood's nighttime metronome. You move toward the river's edge, where a group of temple astronomers is just beginning their vigil. They crouch on a raised platform, scratching notes into clay tablets with remarkable calm. One lifts a hand as a slow-moving star glides just above the ziggurat. "Third light has shifted," he says. He doesn't mean a torch or a lamp. He means the light in the sky that only appears when the air cools enough to shimmer against the stars. A light not everyone can see, but they do. You ask what time it is. He blinks at you, then smiles. "Between the star's breath and the owl's wing. That's the best answer you'll get tonight." And it's perfect. You glance upward again and notice the stars are slightly different than before. The bowl-shaped constellation from earlier has begun its tilt downward. That means that second watch is coming, the middle of the night, when the city is its most vulnerable and its most peaceful. A temple guard passes you, holding a staff carved with 7 notches. He uses it to measure the length of torchlight as it falls across the ground. When the light no longer touches the 4th notch, he stops and sits. It's not science, it's experience, and it's good enough. In a nearby home, a woman quietly ties a reed to her window. If it moves with the next wind, she'll rise to feed her infant. If not, they both sleep. It's a night watch parenting method that historians still don't understand, and yet it's oddly elegant. You peek through a small garden where 2 boys are lying back to back, watching the stars. One whispers, "If I count 3 blinks from that red one, I'll win tomorrow." His brother grumbles, "It blinked 4 already." They giggle. Somewhere, a frog croaks in protest. You begin to realize something beautiful. The Babylonians didn't use time to control life. They used it to feel life more fully, to align with it, to ride it like a slow, wide river under stars. Even now, with most of the city quiet, you feel it. Every breeze, every blink, every rustle. A cat darts past your feet. A priest lights a bowl of incense near a shrine. An old man gently sings to a clay figure by his bedside. You don't understand the words, but they sound like goodnight wishes, not to people, but to time itself. You sit again on a rooftop ledge, feet dangling over a street now wrapped in shadow. The stars above feel closer than ever, so close. You half expect them to speak, and if they do, it won't be in numbers. It will be in patterns, movements, pauses. The city sleeps not in silence, but in measured quiet, like a lullaby with no beginning and no end. The Babylonians didn't need clocks. They had stars that drift, wind that shifts, bells that hush, dreams that return, and now you, to begin to drift, slipping, gently, into your own night watch. The sky is velvet, now deep blue, shading into obsidian, scattered with tiny pinpricks of starlight that twinkle as if they're blinking slowly, sleepily, just like you. Babylon has surrendered to the night. But the city is never truly still. It simply changes tempo. You find yourself walking through one of the outer temple gardens, where silvery leaves rustle in a soft wind. The trees here are planted not for shade, but for night sounds the rustle. The whisper, the occasional flutter. A gardener appears silently, waters a low hedge, then vanishes into the shadows like mist in Babylon. Some people believe these hours belong not to humans, but to the spirits of time, gentle, watchful presences that keep the rhythm when everyone else is asleep. So even during night's quietest stretch, small rituals continue. You round a corner and find a woman seated beside a water basin. She dips a reed into the bowl, flicks a few drops into the air, and whispers to cool the stars. This isn't superstition, it's participation. In Babylon, you didn't observe time, you joined it. A small clay tablet sits next to her. On it, she has carefully drawn phases of the moon, and beneath them, markings of her moods on each night. Some moons make you sleep well, she tells you. Some give you dreams. Some make you think too loud. She's tracking her emotional time. Historians studying these tablets still debate their purpose. Were they part of religious rituals? Early astrology? Mental health logs? Personal calendars? Probably yes. And probably more. Further along the temple wall, you notice a large stone basin with a slow trickle of water. This isn't a fountain. It's a nighttime water clock, or clepsydra. The Babylonians used it to mark watches through the night, measuring how long it took water to rise or fall between etched lines. But there's no ticking, no ding. Just the soft gurgle of dripping water, and someone's foot tapping gently nearby, to stay in sync. A priest nearby watches the water, and mutters. Still in the second watch. The lion star hasn't reached his tail. He's not tired, he's attentive. These hours, the dark middle of night, are when the gods are said to whisper clearest. And so Babylon listens. You glance toward the ziggurat, now silhouetted against the stars. Its top level glowing faintly with torchlight. Up there, star priests watch the skies with remarkable focus, not to find direction, but to measure time's breath. You climb the outer steps quietly, step by slow step, the stone cool beneath your palms. At the top, the air is thinner, cooler, crisp, with celestial awareness. One priest nods to you. You came at the third hush, he says. That's rare. You look confused. He smiles. That's the time when the wind, the animals, and the people all stop moving together for just a blink. You wait, and after a few moments, you feel it. Not silence, but suspended presence. The whole city seems to hold its breath. Then, a small breeze returns. The stars twinkle harder, and the world resumes. You ask how they mark their hours up here. Without bells or voices, he points to a rotating star map, a disc, carved from wood and ivory, with pinholes for each major star. By aligning the disc with the real sky, they track the star paths across the horizon. When Spica aligns with the dog star's shoulder, it's the end of the second watch. When Aldebaran crosses the goat's horn, it's almost time to wake the temple servants. These are not ours. These are celestial sentences. Another priest gestures for you to sit. He offers a warm cloth scented with myrrh. For your forehead, he says. To keep dreams away until you're ready. You oblige. As you lean back, eyes upward, the stars continue their patient journey. They're not in a hurry. They never are. From below, faint sounds drift upward. Someone coughing, a donkey braying once, the creak of a gate, a bowl being set down. Each sound enters the night slowly, as if asking permission. You feel yourself relaxing, further held, not by walls, but by time itself. Time that doesn't demand, doesn't scold, doesn't rush. Time that just is. You realize something profound. Babylon didn't invent time to rule people. It invented ways to let people coexist with time, through stars, through water, through breezes and beetles and bread rising under the sun. You lie back completely now, staring upward as the bowl of sky deepens. The stars swirl, not in chaos, but in quiet purpose. You don't need to understand every alignment or omen to feel their presence working. One priest begins humming softly. A lullaby, not for you, but for the stars. His voice is low, nearly a whisper, and you're not even sure it has words. Just rhythm, just flow. You close your eyes for a moment. The hum continues. The stars move. The water in the clepsydra rises. Time continues, not marching, but gliding, and you float gently along with it. You wake slightly just enough to notice that the stars have shifted. Their positions are different now, angled subtly farther west. The sky still glows with starlight, but its tone has cooled, as if it's holding its breath before dawn. You're still on the ziggurat rooftop, the stone warm beneath you. The hum of the priest long faded into quiet. It's the third watch, what the Babylonians called the Watch of Awakening, though no one is truly awake yet. This is liminal. Time when dreams haven't ended, and the day hasn't begun. You rise slowly and descend the temple stairs. Below, Babylon sleeps more deeply than ever. The animals have stopped murmuring. No footsteps echo. The city is wrapped in a blanket of stillness. But not everyone sleeps. You pass a small house where a woman kneels by a clay oven. She's not baking yet, just waiting for the right breeze. She tells you her grandmother always said, bread only rises when the sky begins to remember the sun. You sit with her for a moment, silent. The clay oven glows faintly inside. She places her palm on it, testing the warmth, then nods. The third wind came. Time to begin. This is how the Babylonians measured the beginning of morning, not by light, but by temperature, wind behavior, and the first scent of earth warming. Some called it the hour of skin. You'd know it by the way the air felt against your face. Further down the alley, a shepherd crouches beside his goats. He doesn't speak, just listens. After a long pause, he murmurs, "The sheep coughed. That means stars are fading behind the mountain." You glance up, and sure enough, a faint line of gray now smudges the eastern horizon. Historians argue whether these observations were mystical or practical. Were they omens, or just well-trained instincts honed over lifetimes of watching skies and animals? Likely both. Babylon didn't separate science from experience. It wove them together. You reach the canal again. Its waters, once glinting gold at midday, now shimmer like lead. Cold, quiet, but moving. A man kneels beside the bank with a bowl, scooping water for a pre-dawn ritual. He doesn't look up, but says softly, "The frogs stopped singing. That's your sign." You hadn't noticed, but now that he mentions it, it's true. The frogs, who had serenaded the night for hours, have gone silent. You follow the water's edge, and spot a small alcove, where a potter prepares his kill. He lights the first flame, then waits until the color of the smoke changes from blue to white. White smoke means the east wind is waking, he tells you. That's when he begins. You realize the entire city has a built-in symphony of sign-sound cues. Smell cues, wind cues, light cues, all woven into people's daily patterns, not rigid, not measured to the second, but precise in their own lived way. Now, the sky begins its slow shift. Not sunrise, just the rumor of it. A faint blush behind the rooftops. A dim outline of distant palm trees. Someone far away starts grinding grain. You sit again on a low stone wall, facing east. A temple servant walks past, placing a burning reed in a clay pot every few paces. These are the dawn lights, used to mark sacred thresholds as the morning creeps in. When the light of the sky finally overtakes the reed's glow, the first call of day begins. It's not a bell, not a horn dot, it's a man's voice, rising like a yawn turned into song. Come, light. Come, dust. Come, birds who eat the night. That's it. That's the call. And with it, the city slowly, beautifully stirs. People begin to rise, not groggily, not begrudgingly, but as if returning from the underworld. Stretching, washing, lighting fires, listening. You spot a mother helping her daughter comb her hair. The girl asks, "Is it morning yet?" The mother touches her cheek and replies, "When you can see your breath no longer, it's day." You exhale and check, just a trace of mist still lingers, but fading. You walk now through a courtyard where a baker dusts his table with flour. He pauses mid-motion to stare at the sky. "One star left," he says. "Then we roll the dough." Sure enough, only one small, stubborn star remains above the rooftops, flickering like the final candle in a room full of new light. There is no alarm in Babylon, only readiness. The day doesn't begin because a number says it does. It begins because you feel it happening in your skin, in your breath, in the twitch of a rooster's feet. And when that final star finally disappears, it happens. A flood of soft early gold spills over the rooftops. Shadows awaken, stretching. Again, cloth on laundry lines glows. Water turns from silver to pink, and Babylon, slowly, deliberately, becomes day again. You feel the full circle, sun to sun, shadow to shadow, a timekeeping without timepieces. And somehow, it makes you feel less alone, less hurried. Because in this place, you don't need to chase the hours. You just walk beside them. The sun has officially crested the horizon, but it doesn't burst in like a modern alarm. It arrives gently, unrolling over Babylon like a soft golden blanket. The rooftops glow. Clay bricks seem to sigh with warmth. And the long shadows that once stretched across the streets now shrink back into corners like sleepy cats. This is first light. Known to the Babylonians as it's not just a time, it's a texture, a temperature, a feeling in the throat and behind the eyes. A promise that yes, the world is beginning again. You're now walking among people who have risen not by the clock, but by scent and breeze, and sound. The air smells of damp dust, fire smoke, and baking barley. In one alley, 2 children race toward the riverbank, shouting, "We're first to greet the water." A tradition, their mother says, goes back generations. You follow them, watching as they scoop water into small painted bowls, not to drink, just to hold. "We keep it till second warmth," one says, "then pour it over the door." That's their family's time ritual, marking morning, not by hours, but by the feeling of the sun warming the clay doorframe. Back in the market square, vendors begin setting out baskets of figs, dates, nuts, and flatbread. But no one is in a hurry. A man arranging lentils in spiral patterns on his stall looks up and shrugs. No shadows on the beans yet. Still early. Shadows are their own kind of clock here. Not just for priests and astronomers, but for bakers, herders, shopkeepers. Even the street sweepers wait for the broom shadow to stretch to their ankle before beginning. Historians often marvel at how precise Babylonian systems, or how they manage to track lunar calendars, predict eclipses, divide the day into 12 parts, all without gears, springs, or ticking hands. But what's more astonishing is that people didn't live by those charts. They lived by what they could feel, smell, and see. You pass a temple scribe now, leaning over a clay tablet. He's tracking the shadow of a pillar, marking its tip with soft dots in clay every few moments. You ask if he's measuring time. He replies, "I'm watching when the shadow sighs." That's a real term, the sigh of the shadow, used to describe the moment when a shadow's length begins to change direction. You love that. Time as a mood. In another courtyard, a woman crushes herbs using a stone bowl. She doesn't time the grind with numbers, she hums, a low melody that repeats. 7 hums and it's done, she says. Unless the sun moves too fast. Then, I hum slower. And that's the beauty of Babylonian time. It isn't about uniformity. It's about tuning yourself to the day. Each person has a relationship with it. Personal, gentle, flexible. You sit again near a fig tree, one that now glows golden in the sunlight. A man nearby is polishing a bronze mirror. He checks its shine not by reflection, but by light spill when the mirror throws sunlight across 3 of his fingers. He knows it's time to carry it to the temple. You ask how long that takes. He shrugs. Same as a poem spoken twice, or until the pigeon lands on the roof. You glance up. No pigeon yet. Just then, a bird calls a long, trilling note. Several people glance toward the eastern sky. That's the 3rd sunbird, someone says. Means the warm winds are near. You didn't even notice the change in air, but now that you think about it, it's true. A dry warmth is replacing the early dampness. Further down the street, a young boy checks the wall of his home, where his older brother had drawn chalk lines the day before. One of them has just caught the edge of sunlight. That's the school light, he says. Time to go. This light-and-wall system is surprisingly accurate. Some families etch grooves into their doorframes, or draw chalk notches when the sun hits a mark. It signals everything from chores to meals to storytelling hour. Modern archaeologists still debate how standardized these were. Some believe they were universal across neighborhoods. Others think they were as personal as fingerprints. Most agree. Babylon had many clocks, and nearly all of them were alive beasts. Shadows, plants, flame sound. Now the city is fully awake. Goats are led through courtyards. Wool is soaked in deep vats for dyeing. Musicians play slow, rising melodies in temple halls' morning prayers, with no set script. Just timing drawn from the rhythm of the day's heat. Even the ziggurat bell rings not on the hour. But at the sun's second blink over the tower, you watch as a priest walks a spiral staircase up the tower wall, pauses, looks to the eastern sky, then gently taps a bowl. Gong, that's the city's sun mark, not because it controls the morning, but because it celebrates that it's here, and now, so are you. Fully present, fully awake, but unhurried. The sun won't push you. The clocks won't chase you. You're living by Babylonian time now, and that means listening, feeling, waiting for the breeze to change. By now, Babylon is fully alive, again but never loud. The city hums. It doesn't roar. Even at its busiest, there's a kind of hush under the activity. Like the city itself knows the day will unfold, whether people race through it or not. It's a rhythm, not a race. You find yourself in the scribe's quarter, where clay tablets are stacked like books, and reed pens sit neatly by bowls of dark ink. One young apprentice, his hands dusted with chalk, is copying the same phrase over and over. The sun does not rush, so why should you? A common proverb, apparently. Next to him, an older scribe is carving a calendar stone. But you quickly see that it's not a calendar like you'd expect. It doesn't have numbered months or days. Instead, it has symbols: a barley sprout, a fishtail, a goat's horn, a wave, a falcon. These stand for phases of the natural world, and the events tied to them. The barley sprout means offerings resume, the scribe says, tapping the image with his stylus. The goat's horn means wool trade opens. The falcon is wind season. Historians have long puzzled over these systems. Some tablets even contradict each other, showing different signs for the same event. But Babylon wasn't aiming for one-size-fits-all timekeeping. Instead, every household, every temple, even every profession used slightly different seasonal clocks, based on what mattered to them. You wander deeper into the quarter and find a small herbalist shop. The shelves are filled with jars, labeled, not by hour, but by usage time. Use before the third shadow. Apply during sunset cloud. Drink if moon passes behind bird star. One jar says simply, for long nights. A customer enters and asks, is it too late for the morning brew? The herbalist checks the shadow of a hanging gourd, nods, and says, you've got 3 bird songs left. Sit. In Babylon even. Medicine followed time, but not clock time. Sensory time. Sound, smell, shade. Back on the street, a potter explains how he times his clay firing. When the fire's edge curls like a bull's horn, he says. Then to ladle turns of water. Then wait for the wall lizard to shift. You're not sure if he's serious, but then again, there is a lizard sunning itself on the kill wall. It's motionless for now. In another courtyard, a seamstress stitches cloth by daylight, shifting her stool every so often. Not for comfort but to keep her fabric in the exact right light angle. Too much brightness, and I miss the weave, she says. Too little, and the thread sulks. She shows you her stitch count log. Not time per stitch, but how many heartbeats per seam. When I'm calm, that's 12 seams an hour, she says with a wink. This section of the city, filled with craftspeople and domestic life, pulses with measured calm. But no one seems to agree on what late means. One boy says his mother calls it past the pigeon yawn. His neighbor calls it after pot 3. Still another refers to the time the fish blink, all accurate in their own strange ways. You duck into a narrow street, one that seems to curve with the sunlight, designed to catch just the right angle in the early afternoon. At the end of it is a communal kitchen where bread loaves puff in. Stone ovens. A woman pulls one out and smiles. It rose with a 5th light, she says, nodding toward the sky. 5th light. You squint upward. The shadows now fall at sharp angles. And you remember what someone said earlier, when shadows point to your knees, it's time to check the barley. So many rules. And yet none of them feel like rules. More like ... agreements. Quiet understandings between people and their environment. Between action and waiting. Outside the kitchen, children play a game that involves guessing how many voice echoes it takes for a word to bounce off the temple wall and return. It changes depending on the time of day, one girl insists. When the air is heavy, the words come slower. That's oddly scientific. You begin to understand. Babylon was full of unspoken data collection. It wasn't timekeeping in the modern sense, but a deep, habitual observation of patterns, cues, and subtle environmental shifts. And that meant time was something you could carry with you. Not trapped in a device, but etched into your senses. You didn't ask what time is it. You asked, what is the sun doing? What does the wind smell like? Which birds are singing? And those questions were enough. You pass by an old man scribbling in the dust with a stick. He draws a large spiral, much like the one you saw in the school earlier. Time circles, he mutters, but it also drifts. He taps the outer edge of the spiral and says, right now, we're at the barley curve. The part where things soften. Then he wipes the spiral away with one sweep of his foot. Gone, he says. Now we begin again. Just like that. The sun has begun its downward tilt, now not visibly rushing. Just leaning westward, casting longer shadows along the worn bricks of the city. Babylon, like a drowsy beast, starts to stretch and slow again. You've been here for almost a full day, and not once has anyone told you a numbered hour. And yet, you've known exactly what time it is. You're in the merchant's district now, a place of careful bustle. Clay weights and silver rings trade hands, but not frantically. One trader lifts a small bell round and cracked with AGN taps it gently against a wooden board. That's not a call to hurry. It's a signal that sun trade has begun. The few hours of market time that occur after the sun starts. It's descent, but before it loses heat. Each neighborhood has its own signal. Some light 3 incense sticks. Others tie red thread around their stall poles. Still others simply say, the fruit shadows are fat enough. You pass a woman selling pomegranates. She arranges them so that each fruit casts a long, oblong shadow in the same direction. They sell better that way, she says. People trust the time when the shadows agree. Another vendor arranges pots of honey and grain. She wears copper cuffs, which, in direct sunlight, slowly warm until they're too hot. That's when I stop, she tells you. When my arms say the sun is done. No clocks. Just temperature as a timepiece. Historians might debate how precise this is, but you're starting to see. Babylon didn't need precise. It needed real. At a nearby square, a group of students sits cross-legged around a low table. A priest draws circles in sand, showing them how the sun marks seasonal direction. Here, he says, pointing to the curve, is where the river begins to shout again. We call this the season of echoing banks. He's not being poetic, he's referencing the time of year when the river's current quickens and bounces sound differently off the walls. That's how some farmers time their planting. They listen. 1. Student raises a hand and asks, how do we know when it's too late in the day to trust light? The priest gestures toward the wall beside them, where a simple plumb line a string with a weighted end swings, gently, when that line falls into its own shadow. He says, light begins to lie. Another scribe whispers, so, ... That's the moment when memory becomes better than sight. Everyone nods, including you. You move onward. Noticing that rooftop courtyards now buzz with the start of evening preparations. Meals are being arranged not by recipe timing, but by cues like when the bread stops steaming or when the oil stops crackling. One mother tells her son, put the lentils on when your feet feel cold again. Feet as thermometers. Why not? In another part of the city, a group of workers stack amphorae of beer. Each one has a tiny wax seal that melts at a known rate. When it curls, one man says, that's delivery time. You watch one curl now, releasing a faint scent of barley. On cue, a boy runs to collect it. You pause by a public garden, where 2 elderly women sit weaving baskets. They're arguing not loudly about whether the light at this hour is called Sipatu, Oe Adanu, light of late certainty, or kaputu oe kutum, shadow of waiting hands. Language scholars still can't agree which is right. But that's the thing about Babylon. Both answers are allowed. Near the garden wall, a cat stretches beneath a tree. Someone whispers, "Time for the temple bell." And sure enough, from high atop the ziggurat, a soft gong sounds just once. You've heard that bell before, but now you understand it's not marking a number. It's acknowledging a change in quality, the shift between brightness and dusk, between doing and winding down. In the kitchen courtyards, cook fires now burn lower. You hear a boy whisper to his sister, "The fire just sighed. It's time to wash." She nods. One home has drawn a chalk line near its gate. As the sun moves, the shadow of the doorframe creeps across it. When it reaches a tiny snail shell embedded in the clay, the family gathers for a meal. That's their dinner bell. A shadow and a snail. It's all so soft, so deeply felt, so impossibly specific. No wonder Babylon thrived. They didn't need time to be measured. They needed it to mean something. And here's the wonder. Despite all this variation, sunbells, cats, cuffs, chalk, curls, everyone seems to stay in rhythm. People meet when they mean to. Bread bakes just right. Stories begin when the air cools enough for breath not to fog. You think of modern life, where time slices the day into clean segments. But here, it stretches. It sways. Time is a dance partner, not a drill sergeant. And now, as the sun brushes the tops of the palm trees in burnt orange, the city leans toward evening, not crashes, not slams, leans, and so do you. Evening has arrived, not with ceremony, but with softness. The sky pulls a veil of orange-gray across its shoulders. The sounds of Babylon grow more intimate, clay lids on pots, sandals brushing dusty stone, the low thump of mortar and pestle as herbs are ground for sleep. This is not the end of the day. It's the soft dissolve between doing and dreaming. You stand at the edge of a public square, where a storyteller is finishing a tale. Children sit cross-legged, blinking slowly, their energy thinning like candle smoke. The story doesn't end with a bang or lesson, it simply drifts off, like everything else today. Time here is not cut into pieces. It's woven, like a river mat, and evening. Evening is where the weave begins to loosen. A nearby temple servant lights reed lanterns along the street. Not all at once, just as the last gold light leaves each wall. You ask how he knows where to begin. He points to the shadow of his own body. When my elbow glows, but my hand does not. It's time, poetic, precise. Babylon, you're drawn toward a home near the canal, where families begin their evening rituals. One mother kneels beside her child, placing a polished obsidian bead in a small bowl of water. The reflection it gives tells her how close moonlight is. If the moon's eye opens in the water, she murmurs, the gods have returned to watch. Across the street, a father blows gently into a clay whistle. It's not a signal, it's a tradition. Each night, one member of the household invites the night in with sound. A different sound each time. Tonight, it's that breathy note, like a bird, calling from far away. You realize the Babylonians didn't just track time, they greeted it, like a guest. They honored its arrivals and departures with action, scent, and sound. In another home, a woman burns resin over a tiny brazier. Its smoke curls in slow spirals, and she watches it carefully. I need 3 strong curls, she says. That's when I lay down the cloth for dreams. She unfolds a piece of embroidered linen and places it on her sleeping mat. Each curl, a measure. Each breath, a clock. You find yourself beside an older man sitting quietly on his stoop. He holds a reed stylus, but isn't writing. Just tapping it gently against his palm, in rhythm with the distant croak of a nightbird. He's sinking himself to the evening. He says nothing. You understand everything. Above, the first evening star appears. Not the brightest, just the first. One by one, people glance upward and murmur soft greetings. Some point, others nod. No one gasps. It's not a surprise. The star is expected. It always arrives when the canal reflects bronze instead of silver. And when that happens, dinner is over. You walk through a courtyard where bowls are being rinsed. No one scrubs in haste. The water swirls lazily, catching the last reflections of day. One child flicks droplets upward, chasing them with her fingers. "I want to catch the one with the sun inside it," she says. The father laughs and replies, "That one's gone already. Tomorrow's sun is still hiding." Farther on, you spot a reed sundial lying unused on a table. It's not needed anymore. Shadows are too soft to measure. But its presence reminds you of how much care goes into Babylon's relationship with time. Even when it can't be read, it's still there, watching. You step inside a home where a lullaby is being sung. The melody is unfamiliar, but the feeling is not. It's one of release. Not to silence but to quiet motion. 2 sleeps, slow. Descending steps. The singer nods to you and hums a final line. Sleep comes when fire stops licking the wall. You notice her lamp's glow has shrunk. Its flame is nearly still. And somehow, that tells you more than any clock ever could. You return to the rooftop of the ziggurat, where the city below now resembles an oil painting left out in twilight, edges blurred. Colors softened, motion stilled. One priest is still awake, charting stars. He marks a clay tablet, murmuring, "The lion has stretched its paw. Time for night ink." He opens a small jar and dips his stylus. The ink for night is thicker, slower to dry because the air is cooler now. Time itself moves differently. At night, you glance out across Babylon. Every street, every alley, every home has its own version of the evening clock, flickering torch, a cooling bowl, a whisper to the stars. And somehow, they all aligned. You wonder how we lost this, how we gave up time we could feel, for time we can only see on screens, how we let the seconds shout louder than the sunset. But here, in this moment, with Babylon glowing softly beneath a field of stars, you remember. You belong to the rhythm, to the long shadows, to the gently closing day. You breathe, you listen, and you wait for the moon to nod goodnight. The sky above Babylon is fully inked, now a deep indigo curtain, pierced only by quiet constellations. Stars flicker with purpose, not for beauty, but for navigation, stories, and timekeeping. And yet, they also feel like companions, scattered, like thoughtful eyes across the heavens, watching the world exhale. Down below, the city does not sleep all at once. It settles in stages. You move through sleeping quarters, where mats have been unrolled, and soft lamps glow inside clay niches. The walls are cool to the touch now, their daytime heat fully released. Someone wraps herself in a linen sheet dyed with indigo. "This one holds the night," she says. It's quieter than white. Another home has scattered salt in a circle by the door. Not for security, but for timing. If the wind blows the salt inward, the father whispers, "It means the moon is strong." That's when we sleep deep. You nod. Of course it does. As you turn down another alley, the scent of burned tamarisk wood curls around you. It's the signature of nighttime incense, smoky, sharp, slightly sweet. One woman crushes dried petals between her fingers and sprinkles them over a small flame. Dreams smell better when invited. You ask how she knows when to begin this ritual. She holds up her palm. When the skin forgets the sun, perfect. Nearby, 2 boys trace star patterns in ash on the ground, copying constellations they saw earlier. "This one is the sleeping goat," one says. If its tail touches the roof shadow, it's second dream time. The Babylonians divided night, much like they did day, not into fixed hours, but into qualities of darkness. First cool, second wind, third stillness, and fourth hush. Each had its own uses, some for sleeping, others for listening, dreaming, or even working by starlight. In one temple annex, a man copies texts by oil lamp, his hands steady, his eyes soft. He tells you, "My best lines come in the third hush." When even the dogs don't stir. You hear no barking, only a distant owl and the hush of the river's breath. Back at the ziggurat's edge, a priest consults a star chart etched in bronze. He adjusts his position, shifting slightly, then marks a soft line in the clay beside him. Noting what? He explains. The first blink of Sirius means it's almost moonbend. You ask what moonbend is. He smiles. The part of night when the moon, even if full, begins to tilt toward sleep. You glance up. Sure enough, The moon seems lower now. Not yet fading, but leaning. Elsewhere, a family begins their last nighttime ritual. They each dip their fingers into a small bowl of milk, touch their foreheads, then whisper thanks not to a god or person, but to time itself. For moving kindly, the mother says. For letting us arrive. It's deeply moving. In another courtyard, a stone basin catches moonlight. A woman kneels beside it, combing her hair with slow strokes. If the strands reflect the stars, it means you're still part of today, she explains. When the stars vanish from the water, you're in tomorrow. You watch her hair shimmer once more. Then dull, slightly tomorrow is coming. You stop beside a man arranging his sleeping mat near an open window. He's placed a small wind chime near Binot, for sound, but for absence. If the chime doesn't sing, it means the winds are sleeping, he says. That's the best hour to dream. Even silence is a timekeeper. You glance at your own hands now. The fingers lightly dusted from walls and doors and bricks you've touched. They feel, ... stilled, not tired, not cold. Just present. You lean against a smooth pillar and watch as tiny oil lamps flicker out one by one across the city. The extinguishing is not sudden, it's staggered. Like a whisper moving slowly from home to home. Each house saying without words, it's time, we've done enough, let's rest. And somehow, Babylon listens. You hear the last temple bowl ring a single, soft tone that melts into the air like the end of a lullaby. A priest nearby murmurs, that's the stars exhale. He closes his book and walks quietly out of sight. Even the canal has changed its voice. It no longer babbles, it glides. And as you look around at the final glow of the night's first phase, you feel something remarkable. A sense of belonging to time. Not ruled by it, not afraid of it, but invited to move with it. Like a tide, your breathing slows. Your thoughts unwind. Because here, in Babylon, the day ends not when the clock says so, but when you feel ready to release it, and tonight, you're ready. Now the city lies fully within the arms of night. You step lightly across rooftops and alleys, the warmth of sun having long since slipped from the stones. Babylon doesn't sleep with both eyes closed, breathes, it pulses gently in the dark, and even now, there are timekeepers awake. You pass a rooftop garden, where a man sits beside a ceramic bowl of water. Its surface unbroken, catching moonlight like a still lake. When the water no longer reflects stars, he murmurs, we've entered deep night. The hour without mirrors. Poetic, and, as it turns out, quite accurate. This was how some Babylonians marked the halfway point of the night. The stars. Reflection would vanish not because they were gone, but because the angle of the sky shifted. A celestial hinge, in the narrow streets. Almost all flames have been pinched out. One house still has a small, slow-burning coal nestled in a clay dish. A mother fans it gently, not to rekindle it, but to read its edge. If the coals glow, hugs only one side, she says, we're in the second shadow rest. You pause, uncertain if that's a time, or a feeling, probably both. Above you, the stars twinkle with intent, not just decoration. Babylonians read their patterns, nightly, rise, decline, return. Some priests could forecast celestial events with jaw-dropping precision, using charts, shadows, and something that resembled intuition. But the average citizen, they just knew the sky. Like you know the scent of rain, or the sound of your mother, calling you home. You pass a family sleeping outside, mats arranged in a circle. One child stirs and whispers, is it still the quiet dark? His father replies, without opening his eyes, yes. The bats are still out. That's his measure. Further on, a young man adjusts a rope, hanging from the side of a home. You notice that it's damp at one end and dry at the other. When dew climbs past this knot, he says, I go inside. He nods toward his dog, curled nearby. She'll move when it reaches the second knot. You'll see. Even the dog is a kind of timekeeper. You crouch beside a row of jars beneath a wooden awning. One drips slowly plink, ... plink ... into a stone cup. The rhythm has changed since you first passed by this spot. A nearby scribe hears it too and says, that's moon drip 5. The sixth drip sings differently. You listen, and sure enough there's a barely perceptible change in tone. He's not mad. He's in tune. This section of the night is known as Gimilu, Oalatu, the curl of the night. It's when dreams are deepest, and thoughts begin to swim upward from the unconscious. Babylonians believed that if you remembered your dreams during this time, they were closer to truth. In one temple annex, a woman records such dreams on clay, not her own, but from others who murmur in their sleep. She writes quickly but carefully. If the words are shaped like clouds, she tells you they're not to be trusted. But if they feel like dust on the tongue, that's real. Another priest rests nearby, eyes half closed, waiting for the moment when the star called ghostlight disappears. It always goes first, he whispers, like it has somewhere else to be. When it vanishes, he smiles and marks the stone beside him with a line. Still later, you're back at the canal's edge. The water now gleams like molten glass, no longer rippling, just barely shifting, as if asleep. A man nearby listens with his eyes closed. No frogs, no fish sighs. That means the next bell is close. You hear a faint wind move through the reeds, the kind of breeze that doesn't cool or warm, just brushes past like an invisible cloak. That's the wind of third, hush, what some call the hour of thin skin. You feel it too, light, barely there, but a signal nonetheless. A little farther on, you pass a door with a simple red handprint painted on it. It's flaking, but still visible. The family here wakes with the first breath of wind that slips under that door. They say when the wind lifts the ash in the corner, it's time to begin again. One child is already stirring. She pulls a small string taut between two clay knobs on her wall. When the string hums, she says, "We go outside." You hold your breath, listening. It doesn't hum yet. You look upward. The constellations have moved again. Orion's belt, known here as the herd, is now nearly at the horizon. When the herd rests, says a whisper beside you, we feed the fire again. That's the fourth watch, the time between dream and stir, when the mind drifts, but the body listens. You climb once more to the ziggurat's roof. Babylon lies still beneath a gauze of starlight, and just there, barely visible, is the first pale smudge of light at the edge of the eastern sky. But you do not rise in alarm. You stay, because now you understand, Babylon doesn't wake up. It returns, like the tide, like breath, like time, itself always turning gently, never lost. The stars blink. A dog-sized dot, and below you, one household lights, a single, flickering flame. The sky is breathing in light again. At first, it's only a hint of soft, cool blue rising faintly behind the black. But it's enough. You're not the only one who notices. Across Babylon, people stir not with surprise, but with readiness. This is the moment they've been waiting for, not mourning as a number, but as a feeling. It's the return of NCSO, Oezedo, the mountains glow. A potter's apprentice, already awake, pours the first ladle of water over a stone, and whispers, it hissed. The sun is almost here. That soft hiss, when cold water hits a warm surface, is one of Babylon's oldest alarm clocks. No hands, no bells, just the sound of light arriving, down by the canal. Fishers are pushing out their boats, not when ordered to, but because the sky's reflection in the water turns from ink to slate, a shade only seen during the first 5 minutes before sunrise. They call it the silence color. You pass a home where someone marks the doorframe with a wet thumb, smearing a half circle just below eye level. That's for first light memory, they explain. To remember what dream came just before waking. Babylonians believed that your final dream just before stirring was often a message. From the gods, from the stars, from the city itself. That's the dream worth writing, one priest says. The others just wander. Further on, in the same garden you passed earlier, a woman leans over a flower that hasn't opened yet. The bloom listens to the ziggurat. She says, when its shadow reaches the roots, she opens. And you watch it happen. One thin petal trembles, then stretches, as if yawning. Sunlight is still below the horizon, but light is already here, not seen, but felt. That moment before brightness is a sacred one. Children sit still. Dogs lie quietly. Even the pigeons hold off their morning complaints. You find your way to a roof, the highest you can safely reach. The city unfolds below, rooftops layered like clay waves. Someone near you stretches and mutters, "We've made the circle again." You remember the spiral scratched in dust, and you realize what the old man meant when he wiped it clean. Time here isn't a staircase, it's a loop, a breath, a soft return. Now the temple bell rings again. Once softly, the same sound you heard the day before. The sound that now means you've made it to the other side. All across Babylon, people stand in silence, not prayer, not habit, just awareness, of light, of self, of time returning. In the shadow of the ziggurat, a child whispers, "This is..." When the world exhales, and so it does, you close your eyes. You breathe with it. You feel the faint touch of morning air across your skin, clean and ready. You listen, no footsteps, no yelling, no horn or engine. Just the sound of Babylon, slowly, gently, ... being ... And here you are, still within its rhythm, still part of its spiral, still listening to time, not as command, but as invitation. Because in Babylon, you never run. Out of time, you simply wait. Until it finds you again. Word count, 1028 wind. 300 words so now. With the first threads of daylight stretching across that ancient sky, we come to the softest part of the night, the ending that isn't really an end. Because Babylon doesn't end. It circles, it breathes, and you've wandered with it through shadow and light, through bells and birdsong, through whispers and dreams. You've tasted time as breath, as wind, as heat and coolness, and the absence of noise. You've followed its shape across rooftops, clay walls, canal water, and temple stairs. Let yourself sink into that rhythm now. Let your body remember the sigh of a shadow, the pause of a coal's glow, the way a snail's trail can signal supper. Let your thoughts scatter like reeds in the early breeze. There is nothing left to chase, no alarms to fear, no clocks waiting to catch you, only time, circling quietly around you, as the ziggurat bell echoes one final note in the distance. Let your own breathing match its calm, steady, soft, unhurried. You are safe here. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where you need to be inside the spiral, riding the gentle arc of a night that knows how to end. Let the morning unfold without you for now. Let Babylon keep watch and drift.